Hi guys, let's be honest. If the Tories were leading Labour and Reform UK in the polls, every Conservative MP would be shouting it from the rooftops, and perhaps even calling for a general election. But when they're struggling, the polls don't matter. While this is correct, polling at this stage makes little or no sense, as we have no idea who will be leading most of the parties and what the political landscape and economic one will be 4 years from now. It gives MPs food for thought. Here one of Kemi Badenoch's shadow cabinet members dismissed the polls that have Reform leading. Is he right, or is he just trying to cope?
But the suggestion, though, on this particular issue is that as Reform UK keeps besting you in the polls, actually that you've been pushed into coming forward with a policy on migration before you'd originally planned to. Is that true?
Some polls have Reform ahead, some polls have us ahead.
But
anyone who is obsessing about polls at this point in the electoral cycle needs to get a life, right? The election is not for 4 years' time. What's happening this week coming is that the Labour Party is bringing its border and security bill forward. That gives us an opportunity to put down amendments and hold Labour to account. And that's what we're going to do by bringing forward sensible policies that are timely, because if we don't act now, if the government doesn't act now, it's going to have a big effect on the number of people who stay in the country long term.
Are you seriously telling our viewers this morning that it doesn't bother you that the Conservatives are sometimes third in the polls, or at the very least bumping around the same level of Nigel Farage's party?
You take my seat, Laura, where Reform took a chunk of my vote at the last election. I have a lot of colleagues that are in the same place. Of course, we take the challenge from Reform very, very seriously. But it's very important that we hold this failing government to account on the mistakes it's making on immigration, the mistakes it's making on Chagos, the mistakes, very serious mistakes, it's making on the economy, which are affecting people in my constituency in Brentwood and Ongar today.
Okay, has Laura Kuenssberg abandoned her position as a Tory hack and now become a Reform UK hack? There's something of a self-fulfilling prophecy or a vicious cycle here when it comes to the media and Reform. So the media amplify Farage and Reform, and then they do well according to polling. And because they do well according to polling, well, they get more amplified by the media. They get more amplified, they do better in polling, and then they get more amplified. So this is something of a vicious cycle or a self-fulfilling prophecy when it comes to Reform. The media seem determined to see Nigel Farage into number 10. They seem determined to give as much support or much of a platform as possible to Reform. And of course, this benefits Reform UK. Now, this is a massive problem for the Conservatives because they are the official opposition. They have many more seats than Reform. The Liberal Democrats are in opposition. They have more seats than Reform. But who are we hearing about all the time? Reform UK. And if people were not looking at Parliament and just getting their information from social media or from programmes like this, you would imagine that Nigel Farage was the leader of the opposition, not Kemi Badenoch. Now, the Conservatives are in a very difficult spot because they have to answer for 14 years of rot, of destruction, of austerity, of Brexit, all of these things. Farage just has to sit on the sidelines and say, I would do things better. Doesn't have to be held to account, doesn't actually have to explain anything. And of course, the media seem determined to give him as much of a platform as possible. And it's not just the BBC, it's ITV, it's Channel 4, Sky News. And of course, he gets completely unchallenged interviews on the likes of GB News and Talk TV. So he has journalists everywhere wanting a bit of Nigel Farage, realizing that this can boost their ratings or boost their profile. And it's harming democracy, of course, and it's harming politics, but it's certainly harming the Conservatives. So what can they do about this? You saw the MP here, the shadow minister, trying to talk about something else, but it keeps coming back to Reform. It keeps coming back to Farage. There's nothing they can really do. They used to have their friends in the media, but now these friends, it seems, have abandoned the Tories and jumped on board Nigel Farage's bandwagon. A problem potentially for Reform is that they will be over-amplified. They will underperform when the elections come around. We've seen it already in a number of cases where there have been by-elections and there have been local elections where Reform were expected to win the seat, and then they lost. They came in third or fourth or worse. So it's potentially the case that the media are focusing on Farage and reform. The Westminster bubble is focusing on Farage and reform. But this isn't actually translating into real votes. So the real test, or the first real test, will be in May. Will reform pick up a huge number of council seats? If they don't, then it will raise alarm bells within reform, because it will show that there isn't real support. The support they have is online, or the support they have is just in the media. Now, of course, the media will double down on trying to promote reform and promote Farage. But if the public are not convinced, then Farage is in serious trouble. Now, I don't know if that's the case. We'll have to wait and see for May, but it's going to be very interesting between now and then. But once again, it seems to be the case that the media is determined to amplify Farage and reform as much as possible. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.